The Dialed In Angling Podcast, presented by OnX Fish, Arneson's Rocky Point Resort, 13 Fishing, and Strike Master Augers. Hey, this week our guest is Randy Topper. He's a tournament angler, a walleye angler, and a man with a lot of boats right now. I know the last 3 tournaments that Randy's fished, he's won boats. Randy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
You know, Randy, you and I first met a couple of years ago. It was at Lund Mania. We were on stage. He won a boat then. My son and I took 3rd place. We won a much smaller boat than Randy's. But that was the first time I met Randy. Randy, we want to get to know you. Not only myself, but our Dialed In Angling listeners want to get to know you. Like I said, you've won 3 boats this year so far. The Graha, the Lund Mania once again. And then, of course, this last one, the NWT tournament out in Green Bay. Let's just start a little bit about you yourself as an angler, where you got your start. I know you fished a lot of AIM tournaments. You partner with a lot of guys, the JT guys. I know some of those guys. I've known you through other people, and I've heard your name a lot through other people, but it seems like this year, or the last couple of years, basically since I've started fishing Lund Mania with my son, getting to know you more. So where'd you get your start in fishing? How'd you get into fishing? How'd you get into tournament fishing? Let's walk us through all that stuff.
Yeah, I started walleye fishing pretty early. I mean, I started fishing very early. I grew up on Pekegama Lake. My parents are still there. They've been there 47 years, so I still have access to the lake and hang out there. But yeah, I mean, there's not a time I can remember where I wasn't fishing, really, off the dock. And my parents were, real lenient with me. So it was kind of great, growing up on the water, right away. I mean, I'm trying to think of how young I was when I was just kind of rowing over to fish bass, probably 8 years old, all the way up until probably, 12. I think my dad bought me a 7.5 horse Chrysler. It was just a old kind of jalopy thing that by the time I got done with it, didn't have a top on it, and the kill switch didn't have any rubber on it. So when you went to try to kill it, it would shock you and you had to just choke it out. And I was always wrenching on that. So it was just great, growing up on the lake. I fished all the time, and it, like I said, it was my parents didn't really fish a lot. My dad liked fishing pike, and we speared and stuff like that. But he always made sure, I was ready to go. I would trap leeches or mow lawns or whatever it took to get gas money to run around the lake. But I started walleye fishing. A neighbor, that rode my bus, his dad was big into walleye fishing and fished some local derbies and stuff like that. And I got to jump in with him. Kind of some of my first stuff getting out, and it started to get to be all the time, every other weekend or so. And then I kind of got to learn walleyes fishing with him. I'm like, I think I could do this on Pekegama. So back to the 7.5 horse Chrysler and the flat bottom boat. I'd have to put, anchors up front to weigh it down. And then I started learning how to get them out there. And then after that, I'm pretty much, to be honest, almost all walleyes. I guess you could say multi-species, because I love fishing some lake trout and I love pike still, stuff like that. But my real passion's walleyes now. But yeah, my first tournament was with that same neighbor, Don Sipe, and his son Adam. We were only, I think I was 15 and Adam was 16. And we didn't have our driver's license. He had his driver's license. I didn't have mine. So we borrowed his dad's boat. We looked at, old school. I mean, we're looking at 30 years ago. So we looked at just a paper map, not even like a nice paper map, and it looked like there was like a weed flat out there. And we landed the boat, and I ran it, and we went and pulled crawlers along that cabbage. It took 2nd place when I was 15. So that's kind of where the bug got me. And it's just escalated from there, some hiatus in between there, between, high school and college. And then I was in the military and did some time overseas and things like that. So there's been some breaks, but I would say pretty consistently, probably the last 25 years, I've had a good few tournaments a year. The past 10, I would say, has been a pretty intense schedule, between 7 and a dozen tournaments a year.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's a great story. I, like you, grew up on the lake as well. Same thing, small boat. My passion for fishing always was like, I love fishing bass. I love fishing pike. I like you. I like fishing lake trout all the time. But it's always like certain points throughout my life and career, there's something that I start geeking out over, or I can't get enough of doing. Like right now, it's lake trout fishing. I literally ran in the door here to do an interview with you because me and my son have been up on Isle Royal for the last 3 days, like just going nuts over lake trout. So, for you over the last few years, I mean, what drives you as an angler? Is it tournament fishing? Is it the competition? Is it, learning new bodies of water? I mean, what makes you tick? Like what for Randy Topper, like you get up in the morning and you think fishing, you're a fish head. What kind of just trips your trigger?
Honestly, I've talked this through with some people, lately in conversations, and I tell them it's tournament angling is kind of a slippery slope if you enjoy fishing and you really love competition. I love competition, was in sports and everything all through high school and stuff, but honestly, it becomes just an addiction. Like anymore, like it's hard for me to, this is where, you know, like it or hate it, it's hard for me to go out without some sort of agenda towards tournament angling. Like if I go out just for fun fishing, it's like, well, we could go to that lake. I haven't been there for a long time, but I might as well be on Pekegama so I could stumble onto something, new. Or maybe we should go to Leech and maybe I'll stumble onto something new there. It's hard for me just to sit and catch a bunch of fish and enjoy it. It's like I'm always in the tournament mindset where it's like, okay, we've caught these. Let's go find bigger ones, or let's go find this. It's not. It really isn't in my mentality anymore. Just to kind of hang out. It's really embedded into everything that I do in the fishing world. Seems geared towards tournaments, and I'd like to be able to steer around that, navigate that a little bit more in the future. But I love it. I do love it, and I would say the other just great part that I love about tournament fishing is the group of guys that I ran into. I've been fortunate enough to have great buddies in the fishing world. We had Hang Loose Outdoors, kind of fairly popular around here for a little while, and we started our guide service. Me and Brock Anderson and Colt and Dylan and Wolf Boys. People have come and gone throughout that, and it was just kind of like a little gang that hung out. And then I met, I don't know, we kind of call it the AIM guys because we started fishing AIMs together, which is me, Chuck Hassey, Dylan, Joe Bricko, Tyler Walden, and Nate Lininger. And we've been kind of thick as thieves for about 8 years now. And that team is just, it's wild. It's everybody on that team has such a crazy work ethic and is so like-minded. Like what I just explained. I mean, everything revolves around, what can we do to excel ourselves in the tournament game? And honestly, since I met them, it's just been, we've had great luck, so it's really been fun. A lot of those relationships, Chuck and I met in college, but I mean, Dylan and I met through Hang Loose, and Colt Anderson, kind of quite a bit younger than me, but I met him through there. But like Nate and Tyler, never knew him. Joe really never knew Joe until we talked JT staff and stuff like that. But now it's like I don't remember a time without them being in my life. And it's like it's only been really 8 years since I've met them, but it's just been, man, it's solid. A solid team where everybody's transparent and everybody's there for a common goal. And that's made it really fun. We work super hard, probably, 10, 12 hours on the water while we're there, but we also have a lot of fun too, so it's kind of a guys weekend / work our butts off for a common goal. But, there's a lot of laughing, a lot of joking, but there's a lot of serious stuff, kind of I would call it mandatory, but we make sure we have a meeting around a map. Every bit of data we've uncovered for the day is shared, and, try to do it as immediate as we can so we can start, figuring out trends and stuff like that. But all that being said, it's a blast. It's a blast. It's a lot of work, juggling life and that. And at the end of every year, I always think to myself, maybe I'm going to step back a little bit. But then by spring, I'm just like a bulldog at the end of his chain, just ready to go again. But yeah, it's a riot. Tournament fishing is what makes me tick for sure. It's kind of everything that I gear up all winter long for. But like you said, Lake Lake trout's been on a little bit of the back burner, and I'd love to get back into that. Isle Royale is one of my bucket lists. I've not been there yet, and Bricko keeps trying to talk me into it. It's like, all right, when do we have time for that? But I got to make time. It sounds like a riot.
You touched on the team aspect of fishing tournaments, over the course of basically since tournaments have been around, especially walleye tournaments, because a lot of bass tournaments now you can't team up as teams, But if you look at some of the successful tournament teams over the years in the walleye world, there's not that many because of what you just said, the transparency aspect. If you're going to work it together as a team, you really got to be buddies and friends, and that's what you're doing. And you also have to have a lot of anglers that are kind of on the same playing field as far as good anglers. And obviously the names you threw out there are fantastic anglers, great tournament anglers. And it's cool to see that you guys aren't just teammates, when it comes to tournament time, you're buddies, you're hanging out, you're having fun. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's been great. You hear other stories throughout the fields of teams coming and going, and a little bit of drama thrown in here. I think a lot of the team stuff, there can be some emotions for sure of different things, and I'm just kind of proud of that friendship for 8 years. Nothing, no big drama or nothing. It's just everybody's easy going, and it seems to just flow. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it would be like just traveling alone, to be honest. I mean, where you can't team up. I guess if you could stay, and how do you not talk about fishing if you're staying with a group of guys and you talk about, you know, you can't team up, but then what do you do? Travel for 10 days and twiddle your thumbs in the hotel all night? Don't really have anybody to talk to. I don't know of another way I could see it being all that fun, to be honest, just traveling around the world by yourself. But yeah, I love it.
That's cool, man. I mean, let's just talk about Green Bay here. You put up 2-day total of 92 pounds, 1 ounce. I mean, that is a killer bag anywhere you go on the planet. But Green Bay, I fished Green Bay extensively over the years. I love it out there. I think it's one of those special places, but Green Bay can be also very nerve-wracking, right? You can throw out a million fish that don't bite, and, there's massive schools of fish in certain areas that, it's just a big challenge. When you're pre-fishing, you go into Green Bay. I mean, what's your mindset? What are you looking for? Did you break down maps? I mean, what led you to that point to get to 92 pounds and 1 ounce in this last tournament?
I think, I keep reflecting on that and trying to, I try to retain it and, talk through it even with the guys more and try to figure out what that makes that tick, because huge success, good success, like a winning bag. One thing that can happen is it's just like it kind of gets left in the dust, and when you lose, you dissect everything heavily. So a lot of times we'll try to do a recap on that stuff to retain it, and I think maybe going into it with just a fresh mindset. It seems like there was a big part of that field that they fished there a whole bunch. I don't know. I think I was doing mainly the same stuff as other people. The only thing I can say that I did different than I normally do is I I fished hard every day. There's been so much, lately fish have been finicky everywhere we go. So it's a lot of, babysitting and looking at fish and not wanting to catch them, or clipping a hook and making sure you don't hook any, just making sure they're going to bite, or, all the tricks, and leaving fish alone. But I honestly went out every day and I was just fishing hard. I casted at every single fish. I mean, I did lay off some spots, obviously, but harder than I ever do. So what I think, and maybe I'm not the only person who did that, but what I think that did is it just kept me so ultra focused on actual fishing instead of, I can think of tournaments where we found them in the first couple days and it's like, okay, we just babysat them for 2 more days. Well, you're not tying lines and throwing different rigs and finding those little tiny things like, okay, at 9 o'clock, they wanted aggressive. At 11 o'clock, we're going to let it just go to the bottom and fluff around in the sand and loaf that bait. At 2 o'clock, they want to chase it all the way to the trolling moor, just tiny little things like that. And I think and this is just my theories, but I think you also just subconsciously pick up on the right fish to throw at when you can catch that many. It's been a long time since I've been able to just catch that many fish and just be okay with it. I mean, I went out, caught tons of fish every day. It was the funnest tournament I've fished in many years. I hope I'm trying to go into the next ones with a clean head because I know that don't work everywhere. If you go in and just wail on fish, you're probably going to regret it. But I think that honestly is what did it, and I landed on fish right away, right out from the landing. And I was like, all the stuff I read and, you get the horror stories of Green Bay, you get the great stories, but a lot of the ones that stick out is how much fish moved and everything. And we had fairly stable weather. We did have some wind switches and I went to the area day 2 of pre-fish. And I would say that was just kind of my core area, like I don't know, 10-mile square there. And I just told myself I was going to dissect the heck out of that. And that's what I did. And there just kind of seemed to be fish everywhere, honestly. I mean, I'm sure you've been hearing that from everybody. It was a great time to be out there. That's for sure. And yeah, I don't know for sure, but I just feel like catching a lot of fish in practice helped a lot because it really trained my eye. It really trained my eye on what fish not to cast at least a large percentage. Of course, I'm going to cast accidentally at some 6s and 7s, but my goal was to try to not cast at anything under 8, and practice was the only way I could, figure out how to do that. I'm not on the water all the time. The only time I'm on the water between work is practice. So that's what I did, and it seemed to work. By the time we got there, I figured if I didn't cast at a 7, I wouldn't have to pull it up and sit there and be like, oh man, should we keep a 7? I want to, but I got 8s in practice. Of course I did catch a couple and them decisions were tough, but yeah, that's the only thing I can think of that could set me apart of that grade of anglers, that and some luck. always helps.
When you're staring at, like I always, now with forward facing sonar, we're throwing at red dots all the time. You touched on, first of all, I want to talk about 2 things you talked about there. One, do you think some of these, bodies of water that you're going to, that the fish have been more finicky this season because of the weather, the wind, the elements, or is it because everyone's throwing at them? Let's start with that question first, and then we'll get into my second red dot question.
Yeah, it's been a couple years of this around northern Minnesota, no secret. The last 2 years I was heavily on because it just seemed like we had a huge explosion of every kind of bait that could ever imagine. It seems like every lake, yeah, we had rusties, but like everywhere I go is like a crazy amount of rusties. Like I don't know how many crayfish that I mean, Bekegama has never been like that. And so you got forage from 6 inches of water to, and I'll just kind of use Bekegama as example, and then thousands upon thousands of perch. The smelt are back. A tulipes seem to hatch. And, cruising around the other lakes, like Cass is another good example. There's so much bait in there. So my excuse for the last couple of years was, I don't think it's because so many people get to cast at the same fish. I just think that the fish are fed so well the past few years that they're just tough to catch. Now I'm not so sure. How many years of, it's kind of starting to seem like, you know, there's thousands of laser beams out there looking straight at fish, and every kind of jig and trick everybody knows is whipping by walleyes' heads, or they're just getting more educated. There's thousands of fish everywhere. I don't know if that's the problem. I mean, I'm not a biologist, but it's just like Mother Nature has a way of protecting herself, and it's like she's just clamming them up. That's my take on it, I guess.
Arneson's Rocky Point Resort in northern Minnesota offers a little something for everyone. Nestled on Lake of the Woods' South Shore, it provides easy access to 14 remarkable reefs. Serious anglers know that Arneson's offers some of the best fishing, charter fishing, and small boat fishing options, all supported by the largest protected marina on the lake's South Shore. Accommodation selections range from 1 to 5 bedrooms. Equipped with all the modern conveniences, guests can enjoy a delightful dining experience and stunning lake views at the Rock Harbor Lodge, an on-site, full-service bar and restaurant. The two beaches provide hours of fun for the whole family. Whether you're seeking an idyllic fishing spot or a relaxing vacation, Arneson's Rocky Point has everything you need. Check them out at arnesonsresort.com. OnX Fish is the best tool I have ever used for finding new lakes to target. Quickly filter lakes by species, then select trophy potential, high abundance, keeper potential, or high stocking effort to find the fish you are after in the size and the numbers you are trying to catch. Download from the App Store today to get research tools for the serious anglers and beginners alike, giving you the data to target the right lakes and the confidence to get there. Use tools like recent imagery, fishing hotspot data, or the best-in-class weather features that call out current wind, weather, barometer, moon phase, majors and minors, along with precip and more. OnX Fish is a phenomenal tool both on and off the water for discovering new fishing opportunities, many of which you'd never known existed. Download OnX Fish Midwest today, the app that is changing the game on ice and open water.
Everyone's different. That's why I wanted to ask you that, because I've asked people, some of my close friends, they say, forward-facing sonar doesn't affect them. I know me personally, so there's some days where I hit them with the beam and they don't like it, right? Smallmouth bass and mille lacs that have been, highly targeted. I see it in the winter. I run a guide service year-round. So in the winter months when the fish are really negative, I don't care if it's a walleye, a crappie, bluegill, whatever you're chasing. If they're in a negative mood, you hit them with that beam in the winter, or you make noise or boat noise or whatever it may be, they're gone, right? They're not going to bite. They don't want to feed. Just being up on Lake Superior, how clear it is. Those fish see you. They feel that beam. Sometimes they're not going to eat it. When they're in a really bitey mood, they're positive. They don't care. They don't care about the beam. They don't care about the noise. I see it in the winter where you'll be in 25 feet of water, you walk over the top of those fish and they're gone, right? Not you hit them with a beam, they're gone. So, for me personally, I think it has to do with the mood they're in. First of all, I'm like you. I don't think there's a lack of fish. It seems like you can go to these small little bodies of water and you're amazed how many walleyes are in that lake, or how many big walleyes are in that lake, or bass, or whatever it may be. And I'm kind of with you in the sense in the bait fish boom, because, you look at mille lacs, you go look at leech, you look at pokegama, cass, winnie, across the board. These fish are super well fed. I was just up at Lake of the Woods on the Canadian side. You want to talk about bait, it's nonstop. And so, yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the conditions, but I also think sometimes, on a lot of these lakes, especially pokegama where it's super clear, there's a lot of other factors. You add in forward-facing sonar to it. Now you have fishing pressure where you have fish that have been casted at, whereas before they probably never have seen a bait before. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it on small lakes or certain bodies of water where I know when I was up in Canada, I kind of went up into Shoal Lake and some weird spots that I guarantee these fish have never seen a jig plastic like snapped in their face. I was throwing mooch minnows, right, and swimming over the top of them. You could tell the ones that had never seen a bait thrown at them before. And then other parts of Lake of the Woods, I'd throw a bait at them and they would, it would spook them. They didn't like that. They didn't, they just responded differently. So that's why I wanted to get your take on that, because it seems like there was like a honeymoon a couple of 2 or 3 years ago, where it was like every lake I went to, you could throw at them and you'd get bit. It didn't matter if it was a pot of them, if it was one big fish, but maybe it was more the fact that, there wasn't bait in the lake. I don't know, but and maybe we're too early in the progression of forward-facing sonar to know that this is it only, or are we just in a phase or a cycle or a year where, the fishing's a little tougher? Because this year in particular, even more so than last year, right out of the gates, it seemed like the fish were really finicky on leech, for example. I'd go out there one day and crush them. The next day it was like just grind fest. And, not tournament fishing out there, but just an angler who's guiding out there, that becomes challenging. Whereas it seemed like a few years ago, I could go anywhere and catch them anywhere, and it didn't matter.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We don't have enough years of data to just make assumptions. I think it certainly could be a perfect storm, that it just so happens that forward facing is out, and of course it probably doesn't help any, but are we in a perfect storm where all those things add up and we got a place to point a finger? So it's kind of easy to point it, but really honestly, we don't really know until we get a long data point of, okay, we can say that this must be it because it's been a long time and fish are all finicky like that. But yeah, I don't know. It sure is it is a big question, and I'm sure it's a big debate. It really is. So yeah, I guess we'll just have to see as things unfold. I got a theory on some fish that a lot of fish that there's like multiple different reactions to or a mindset of a different fish. There's like a subspecies that it has always been just a attacking fish. I mean, and then there's always been ones that are just, scavengers or whatever. And that was always my theory because the conversation always comes up about jig wraps. Sitting around a table, we always like, why are we not? I mean, when jig wraps first came out, you could throw that thing and it was the most insane thing in the world. You could pick apart a school in every single cast, and that just does not happen anymore. So the only theory I could possibly have on that is there was like a subspecies of fish that's the way their brain worked. They were all reactionary. And then we all got on it. All the great fishermen got on that, and everybody had a jig wrap. I mean, it was crisscross jig wraps all over the place. And did we catch 80% of those fish that had that mentality that they just there's nothing that could stop them. They had to eat that thing. And we're just kind of phasing that out because it is wild that a jig, I don't think they're cognitive enough to know, well, I ain't going to hit that thing again, because I don't think their brain's that complex. I just think that there was, if there's 1,000 of them, walleyes, 100 of them, that's the way they react, and they probably got caught. I don't know what other explanation there is for that, but it is sure a wild conversation. If you fished a lot and you followed walleye fishing, what the jig wrap used to do compared to what it does now it's crazy.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring that up because, I think about that a lot, not just with jig wraps, but other styles of fishing, spinners or whatever it may be, certain bodies of water. But a lot of places, it seemed like you'd throw a spinner behind the boat on a small split shot or a small worm weight, and you just catch them everywhere, right? And then now with forward-facing sonar, I'm going over the top of those same fish. Like, you know what? I'm going to try trolling today because they're not reacting to a jig crawler. They're not reacting to a mooch minnow. They're not reacting to a jerk bait. And I do that, and it's like I'm spooking all these fish. Like, how did I ever catch them trolling before? And now I can't do that. And so, some of those questions always pop in my mind. I would say I'm fishing 90% different than I ever did in the past because of forward-facing sonar. And so, how would I fish this differently if I just pulled this out of the water? Are they, you know what I mean? Like, are there other ways that we could be fishing right now and utilizing technology that we're not doing, that we might be doing in a couple of years? Is that fair to ask you? Like, pitching a jig crawler in the face of a walleye right now, or a moochman or whatever in their face, are we going to look at that saying, wow, I can't believe we caught that many fish doing that? remember when that worked type of thing.
Yeah, that conversation comes up so often too, because, here's what'll happen. It's like Oahe for one. We ended up trolling. Most of the team ended up trolling in that one. But besides that, I'd pull out we called it the meat stick, and it's won us all kinds of money, just the old big long rod with a bouncer and a spinner. And I keep telling, we all talk about it at night. It's like somebody needs to go run spinners down that, because maybe we just need to cover water. And then we say, well, how did we ever catch fish like that? Because I can't. Well, we did it all day long, every day. And when we were winning money on just old school stuff, the nuances we would pick up on were ridiculous. Like I remember one time when we went, Chuck and I won Leech, and Nate and Tyler were second. I think Dylan and Joe are right up in there. It was literally to the point with our minnows where we were measuring them. So they had to be like a 4.5-inch minnow. And maybe it's a little bit of confidence, but we sat and picked through every single one, not just that's a pretty good one, with a ruler. So back in the day before we had all that stuff, we were so ultra focused on those tiniest details. It was a yellow bead and an orange bead. Nope, that didn't work. We got 8 guys out there. You try this color, you try this color. We're not doing that anymore. So it's like, if all of a sudden someone just ripped our live deucers off and threw them in the garage, would a few days of going out and tackling it, would we be back into it and catching them? I mean, it would be real tough to do, but I'd be interested to see, because that's what happens. We're like, okay, I'm going to go pull chubs. You go do that. I remember, Lund Mania this year, Nate said that. He's like, I'm just going to go pull chubs all day long. So I know if, we can do that during the tournament. And it's the same story every time. It's maybe an hour and you're texting. It's like, how's the chubs going? Or how's the spinners going? Or something. Yeah, I gave that up already. I'm back to hunting with the sonar. It's like, yeah, it's just so hard to do because, man, when you're not throwing at a known fish anymore and you feel like you're just lost out there, you're looking at the lake, how big it is. And you're like, what did we do back in the day? But yeah, I think we just tackled it different. We had to do it. So it was, I don't know. I'd like to find out, it'd be interesting to see, a couple just random derbies. And I guess MTT's kind of doing it. They got what do they call it?
The non-forward facing sonar, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of neat. Some of those guys are taking on to that, and I think it's fun to watch that some of the guys are doing that. But yeah, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough to do after running forward. That's for sure.
For sure. I just, being out with a few buddies where, they are actually incorporating using forward-facing sonar, forward, backward in areas where you have to troll, like out in, basically, the reservoirs out in the Dakotas, even where I was just up on Lake Superior, okay, I'm running down lake trout, but I also have like a coho rod or a salmon rod, just a spoon, just sitting there at all times, because when the salmon rip through, they come through wide open. Well, there's a reason why the trollers do so well out there. Like you see them, Lake Michigan, same thing. I love casting at salmon, but they're so hard to target because they move so fast. They're not like walleyes where they just sit there and you can track them down. I mean, they're moving, or lake trout where they're kind of on these humps or whatever. These salmon are moving. And so it's a real challenge, like getting in front of them. I would like to incorporate, extended range deucers where I'm looking back, looking forward, scanning in perspective, where now I can cover lots and lots of water, not just hunting down, dots in front of me or what's coming in front of me. But in a situation like that, where you're out in a Great Lake, you're out in a vast reservoir, I sort of geek out over technology. I know when it comes to forward-facing sonar, there's probably people listening to this podcast that can't stand it, or they're against it, or whatever, or they're listening to us right now thinking, oh my gosh, this is the end when it comes to fishing. But honestly, I want to figure out a way how I can incorporate, and this is the ideal setup I'd have for trolling, just because my mind is fresh off of Lake Superior. But if I was on a Great Lake looking for salmon, right, I would have one deucer in perspective mode up front on my trolling motor, one extended range deucer below that. Then in the back, I'd have one facing back towards my baits. I would be trolling while I'm up front. I would be having someone manage those baits in the back, and then I would be up front casting at those fish as they come. And you could do that because you can run multiple lines out there. You could do that just for covering water's sake. I want to know where these fish are at. I want to see how many fish I can catch. And I want to see if doing that while trolling if I'm better off doing that trolling versus casting at dots. And I'm not saying that I always want to do it, because I'm like you, where I have a really hard time just going back to old school fishing, even guiding. Like, it's really hard for me when somebody jumps in the boat and, I'm tracking down fish in the front, or I've got them on a pole and the front, and I'm looking for fish for people. And all of a sudden the guy in the back just throws his jig out the side. He wants to fish, right? He doesn't want to track down fish. He just wants to fish with a jig and a minnow, a bobber, whatever it is. And he's just throwing his bait out the back, not paying attention to what I'm doing. I have a hard time as a guide where I'm like, hey, can you reel up? Like, there's no fish here. I'll show you. Like, there's zero fish. Let's just keep going. And so I don't know. I think, we're at one phase of technology, and a lot of people say, oh, this is it. This is the end all. But it's really not. I mean, you take a lake the size of Green Bay that you just fished a tournament in, or something I'm referencing right now up at Lake Superior, even finding fish on or off structure is a challenge. Even with that sort of technology that you have, I think as we move towards the future, you hear a lot of talk about, pros and cons of the new LiveScope 2, anglers that are using it, anglers that are using, LiveScopes in the manner that I'm just speaking about here, whether it's perspective mode, forward facing. It's still a real challenge to put them in a boat, on a lake like we're talking about, or a body of water, because what I've learned so much is the fact that there are fish suspended everywhere. There's fish on structure everywhere. There's fish on the inside edge of the weed line, the outside edge of the weed line. They're absolutely everywhere. And so I don't know. Where do we go next? How do you start incorporating? Do you start incorporating more deucers forward and backward to kind of cover more water? I'm not sure.
Yeah, those are all the things that's an intense conversation with us all the time. We're always trying to look for, how are we going to get at the edge on these? I mean, the field of anglers right now is so wildly good. Like, everybody who's out there, it's just crazy. So it's always, how do we incorporate old school with now, and how do we move forward, and when you're talking about tournaments, it's the tiniest details, because everybody is so good. How do you manage your time just a little bit better? So, if I'm fishing against all the best people in the world, how do I gain 10 minutes on them, or 5 minutes on them, or even 1 minute on them? Because that's a big deal. If that on top of exactly like you're saying, I mean, we've done all kinds of crazy stuff. I made a homemade bracket and made side live imaging, so I could cruise instead of just side imaging and catch that stuff, trying that, and, just tons of different stuff that we've all, go through the winter. What happens is a lot of it gets really expensive, and it just goes into a box somewhere, like the tackle. You show up to a tournament and, we got to have these little flies with this thing. And then pretty soon you got, if we have one, we got to have 30 of them. And then you would say, oh, that didn't work. We should have just brought crawlers and a plain hook. But yeah, I'm with you, as far as looking forward and to always finding the next thing. It's technology, right? I think the sky, honestly, I've been in the industry for a good bit now, and I don't remember a time the sky wasn't falling for a good group of people. When I remember when, for the first Lowrance came out with the high def deucer. It's like, holy cow. I mean, there's going to be no fish left. And then mapping came out and all the secrets are gone and there's going to be no fish left. And then side scan came out. There's no fish left, all this stuff. But technology is never going to stop. I mean, that's just like you said, there's just crazy amounts of fish out there. It's more than anybody can think of. And I don't know. I wish I knew all the right answers to how to move forward with it. But I mean, this is a whole nother can of worms we're kind of opening up here. But yeah, it's fun to keep trying to being on the cutting edge. Because if you're not on the cutting edge right now, and if you want to be a tournament angler, it's tough to compete if you're not right there on top of everything new, because there's always a tiny edge as new things come out. And that's sometimes all you need is a slight, tiny little edge.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, look at the weights out in Green Bay. Look at the weights in Erie, not just the NWT. You take the AIM tournaments. Look at the MTTs that was just up at Lake of the Woods. The weights that are coming in and how stacked the anglers are at the top is incredible. Probably more so than any other time period in history. And it's because guys are getting so efficient and running down dots that, that they don't miss a thing. And, just even Lund Mania, my son and I fished it this year. We have the last few years. It's sort of a fun thing. My son is 18 years old now. We started fishing at 3 years ago. I mean, I had all overs. I had really good ones. We dumped a couple good ones, but didn't make the cut, didn't make the top 10. And we had all really good fish. I think our smallest one was like a little over 20. And, I mean, in the past, those would have always made the cut. You'd have been in the top 10. You have all overs. You make the cut, right? And it's a one-day tournament. It's a fun deal. I get that. But my competitive nature, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I walked over to the Legion or whatever in New York Mills. I'm like, we didn't make the cut? Are you kidding me? We had really good fish. And based on, we only pre-fished for a few days, but based on pre-fishing, I felt like we ran down good ones, even though we lost a few. And like you said, that every detail counts when it comes to tournament fishing. You can't overlook anything. The fact that you got a good team is one thing, but Randy, you're really doing an unbelievable job out there as far as catching fish. I see your name all over the place. I really appreciate you jumping on the podcast. I don't want to take up a whole lot more of your time, but I do want to touch on just your mindset going into the championship for the NWT. You're going to be fishing that here in a few weeks. I know it's a few other good buddies of mine that are doing that. I fish Sakakawea. I love that lake out there. It's really fun, but it's another lake that can be really challenging because the fish can be shallow or they can be extremely deep, right? They're smelt eaters. The lake's down right now. Just looking at like the Governor's Cup and some of the tournaments they had out there. Recently, I talked to a few buddies of mine that were out there. It was a challenge, and going out of Garrison in particular, just because I've fished out there a lot, I like the other side of the lake much better. It's just me. I don't do as well over in Garrison, but I'm not tournament fishing like you are. I'm not combing every inch of water. I don't want to know your secrets going into Sakakawea, but what's your mindset building up to it? What are you geeking out about that fishery?
The main thing is where my head's at when I'm in the Dakotas. I feel like maybe I was in another life. I lived in the Dakotas. I just love it there. Like, I feel at home there. The people are awesome there. So I'm always in a good mood in the Dakotas. It's awesome. I love the landscape to me is absolutely gorgeous. So I get up every morning and I'm just thankful that I'm actually there. The fishing is second, and it seems to, we've done pretty well. Chuck and I won a AIM national out of Bismarck, and we were leading day one of a national out of Sakakawea up in the Van Hook area, and then kind of crap the bed the next day. But still, for one day we beat the best of the best and just couldn't do it too. But so I just love the Dakotas. I mean, my biggest mindset I'm trying to get into, and I appreciate the kind words. I've had a great month and a half here. It's the craziest run that I've been on. And what I'm trying to do my best at is not really think about it. And it's kind of a bummer because I want to celebrate and I want to be happy, but I also want to go into this tournament is just as hungry as I was, at the beginning of the year when I wanted it this bad, and not be like, oh man, I just really did. I had a great month here, the best month I've ever had, and I don't want to get too lackadaisical going in there, just being comfortable with my year. I'm not comfortable yet. I want to win the championship. So I'm trying to put all that behind me, focus on what I need to do there. And yeah, ready to get out there and grind. I know I'm going to go into it with a fresh mind because I have heard, and the research I've been starting to do, things are changing heavily. So, I'm going to go out there, it's another walleye lake. I'm just going to start basic and move forward. And I'm, like I said, really excited to be there because every day you wake up, I can say that Erie was the exact opposite of that for me. I got up and I left my VRBO. I want revenge on Erie, but I didn't like really being there because I'd leave my VRBO. It was kind of a little country VRBO. And within about 2 minutes after about my 10th sip of coffee, it was absolute chaos. Like I was driving downtown Minneapolis because it was like interstate to get to every landing. I'm like, what is this? I'm northern Minnesota boy. When I get up in the morning, I'm listening to the birds chirp and I'm driving to Winnie Landing or Pekegama. And I was like, I see 3 cars and people are waving and they're not waving at me there. They're flipping me off because I don't know how to drive in a big city. And the faster I could get out of there, actually, I mean, the fishing was fun and I do want to get back there just for revenge on that lake, but it's kind of the dead opposite for me. Erie is like crazy, busy, hustle and bustle, interstates right up to every landing. North Dakota is just like salt of the earth people, it's just, I've never been any place where they're so nice. And it's just like, I tell my wife I'd move there if we could. She don't want much part of it, but it's like, it's like you kind of go back in time about 20 years. It's just great. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, if you like fishing, if you like killing pheasants, if you like shooting ducks, geese, whatever, deer, love being in the Dakotas, especially out by Sakakawea. It's like you're in the Badlands and you're fishing. You can hear roosters cackling on the side. You see mule deer running around. I mean, I can't think of too many better places on the planet than to be out there fishing on that body of water. I got buddies out there. We've taken boats out to islands and shot roosters in the fall and then hooked up our boats and went and whacked a bunch of 9 and 10 pound walleyes.
Yeah.
I mean, they just take it for granted. If it weren't for the wind, I think I could convince my wife to move out there. I have got a ton of buddies in Minot. I got buddies in Devil's Lake. I got buddies, and even South Dakota for that matter. The reservoirs down there and the lakes they have and the hunting and fishing. It, like you said, Northern Minnesota is my home as well, but I would move to the Dakotas. I could live out there if it weren't for the wind. Right. And I like trees. I like to hide behind trees. I grew up in the woods, so every time I'm out there, I'm like, man, you can really see a long ways. I've got buddies from the Dakotas, and they deer hunt with us here, and he's like, how do you even shoot a deer? I can only see about 70 yards on my stand. So, but. If they'd plant a few more trees and you could stop the wind, I'd be there next week.
I agree with that 100%. Yeah, there's times I went to college in Crookston and that was just a big change for me. And the same way as like, it's almost like you can't even feel yourself think some days. Like how many days does the wind blow out here? I feel like my head's hollow and it's just, I'm over it. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's just, it seems like you can't escape it sometimes, but yeah, you are right about that. There's a little bit of downfalls, but yeah, I'm ready. I just was got half the boat all cleaned up today, and I don't know what I'm going to be doing there yet. But I'm hoping whatever it is, it's sacking up big weights again. I'd love to have a great cushion like day one of Green Bay. That might be a once in a lifetimer.
Now, going into a tournament like this where there may be a lot of wind, does that change how you fish, how you go at it? Because, I take my hat off to you and a lot of other tournament anglers out there that, when the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour, I don't regret not being out there or not going to great lengths to where you have to go to catch them. How does that complicate things? But how does that also go into your game plan of pre-fishing? Do you have backup spots? I mean, what's your mindset there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not. There's sometimes where I over practice, and by the time game day comes and it's really windy like that, I can lose composure because it'll test every nerve that you have in the wind because everything is so hard. And I can tell you what, um, power breaks now are crazy because it's almost like the wind. It's still, I would rather the wind not blowing and I wouldn't have to use them. But when I have to use them and you're going downwind and you can kind of just pull yourself back, it's almost like the wind's blowing half the speed. And it sometimes can help you because if you get onto a bite where you're not looking for schools and you're not sitting wanting to bang up a school of fish, or there's 100 by 100 square yards of fish where you're trying to really stay, if they're spread out and suspended or something, it's actually can be great. Just jump on the wind, go downwind. When you see one, you can, hit the brakes for a little bit. If it's bitey, if not, you're covering water at 4 miles an hour, if you're going forward. So the technology that we have nowadays, it's made it a lot easier to do. But I guess maybe there's some guys out there that just love it. But for me, if I don't have to have it, I'd rather not have it. I'd rather catch a lot less fish and not deal with wind than have the wind and catch more fish. It's just, I mean, your rods are tangling more. It just seems like it's really easy to unravel in wind. Like the bad things can just keep compounding and have plenty of times for me. But I'm thankful nowadays that technology is a little different, and we'll see. I mean, it can get real windy out there where it's really tough to scope. But I can tell you what, these guys that I've learned this year, this is the first year I've fished the whole circuit. It don't matter how hard the wind blows. I mean, if that tournament's going out, they're gonna scope and they're gonna get them. They're just so good at it. So if it's gonna blow, I'm hoping it's blowing the whole time so I can practice in it. That doesn't make for a very fun vacation, but I'd love to be dialed in and ready. And if it decides to lay down for tournament day, it's kind of like you're swinging a weighted bat all week and you go in but yeah, it can get nasty out there. There's been a lot of times, I can say a lot of times on the Minnesota lakes around here, they're not so wind driven in my opinion. A lot of times I'm just going to the calm side of the lake and I find a bite somewhere on that. If it's going to blow 35 on leech or Cass, there's many times where I'm seeing that forecast. I'm like, I'm going to go find, A through C spots on that east shore if it's going to blow. And that's where I'm going to try to stay. And I'll make something happen throughout the day. And I won't be battling all that stuff and breaking my stuff and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different strategies in the big wind. I'm going to guess there's no doubt about it. We're going to have plenty of it at some point in time in the week that I'm out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to wish you good luck out there in the Dakotas. Good luck at the championship. I really appreciate you jumping on the podcast. One last thing I want to touch on, just because I know you're an angler, you're an outdoorsman. As soon as the tournaments are over this fall, are you looking forward to getting out fishing? Are you looking forward to sitting in a deer stand, killing birds? What's Randy Topper going to do after the tournament season's over? Are you just going to be fixing all the stuff that you broke throughout the season?
Kind of a funny story. I was telling Buddy the other day, somebody asked me, hey, aren't you the fishing guy? And I said, kind of like Happy Gilmore. I said, actually, no, I'm actually a hunter. I only fish to raise money to hunt. So I am a whitetail nut. So honestly, probably soon as this one's over, I don't know if I'll pick up any more. And I'll probably, I've been real sidetracked. I want to get some cameras going. I want to get some spots. I'd love to get a hunt or two locked down, whether that's at meet some new people or a lease. I've been looking for a lease. It's just, I'm so busy, but this year might just be I'd love to find an outfitter, a whitetail deal or something like that. That's kind of going to be my focus as soon as this tournament's done, to get a couple hunts locked in. So that's where my focus will be immediately. Besides, it's football season. My boy's playing football. uh, kind of getting back with the family and having things a little bit more streamlined, work I'll be able to help out there. That'll get a little more tolerable and better. And, hanging out with family, a good little stint till I go on a couple of those hunting trips. But besides that, I'm looking forward to the first football game more than all of that put together. So
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Having a son that just graduated high school, myself, he's going off to college. We've been packing in all these fishing trips, but I've been talking to him. We got drawn for a few different tags this year. So, I'm looking forward to that. But my son was a really good football player, a linebacker for Moose Lake, and it's going to be a little different for me going to the football field this year. So take it all in, take it from someone that I can't believe my son graduated high school already.
Wow.
But Friday night lights is going to hit a little bit differently. So yeah, I highly encourage, don't miss any of those games. But I can tell you one thing about this year of not being handcuffed to go on a football field. So many times when my trail cameras are going off and it's Friday night and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got a game in I Falls or wherever, up on the Iron Range, and my trail cams are going off and I can't be bow hunting. I will be in a tree stand this year. I can tell you that, man. So good luck, Randy. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. We're going to be pulling for you. We'll follow you on the NWT. A lot of our listeners, I'm sure, are going to be pumped to listen to this podcast and pulling for you as well. So good luck, man.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. As always, I'm Tony Roach. This has been the Dialed In Angling Podcast. Thanks for tuning in and good luck fishing.